Hey, hi everyone. This is FifiSqueaks, the mouse girl and a house girl. My pronouns are she, her, and today we're going to have a chat. Now, for those that don't know, today marks my 1 year anniversary on HRT. Last year, on this day, I made the trip to my assigned pharmacy, paid for my first patches and pills to help shape my body into the woman I was always meant to be. Today, I thought it'd be neat to share some of my experiences. Now, I thought about starting this retrospective with my first day on HRT, but I kind of feel like the context on how important this was to me and the journey that I took requires going back a little bit further. So, I'd like to believe that another reason to do that is because my experience may not be that unique, and maybe it inspires someone who may be struggling with the same thing or struggling with speaking up because they feel that they are alone. So hopefully, my journey through HRT will inspire you and push you to be who you want to be. So let's jump right in. Now, before transitioning, I've known about my gender identity for a good number of years before I had ever talked to a professional about HRT. I talked about it in a short essay that you can find on my Patreon, link in the description. But the long and short of it is that I always felt closer to the women in my life than the men. I looked up to women characters in media more than males, and I had small fantasies here and there about being the woman in a lot of film romances and sex scenes that I've seen in my life. And I never really understood why that was until I learned what being trans was. So, fast forward several years to when I was living on my own, and in Baltimore specifically, I had just graduated college, and this was the first opportunity that I could really explore my gender. Unfortunately, I was a homeowner at the time, coming out of college with college debt and with a house payments and all that. I didn't have a lot of money for anything really. I had the money that I needed to pay for food, to pay for mortgage, but things like femme clothing and accessories, let alone medication, was completely off the table. So instead, I chose to express myself online. I made and role played mostly women characters in MMORPGs like Guild Wars 2, EverQuest 2, and World of Warcraft. I mained women in my favorite fighting games, and I went by feminine names on forums and discords. Basically, I took every opportunity I could to embrace who I was. Now, again, early on, I didn't know that being trans was an option because my father was Republican, is Republican, I should say. And he raised me to believe that since I was born cis male, that was the only thing I could ever be. But then, as I went to college and spent more time online, I met trans men, trans women, NBs, lesbians, gay people, just a lot of people under the spectrum of the LGBTQ plus community that taught me a lot about what I could be. I learned that I could eventually transition to who I was rather than what society and the accident of birth asked of me. Now, that was still a pipe dream because I didn't know what it would take, I didn't know what it would entail, and this was just a wish for myself. Now, fast forward maybe 20 years or so later, in 2025 of spring last year. At that time, I had moved out of the house because I was living with family because, during the pandemic, I lost my job. And so I had to move back in with family so that I could make ends meet. And I made the big decision to move out again to live out in my current home. Now, I'm not going to mention where, but at the time I was living with a trans couple. They helped me to find a gender clinic because they realized what my goals were and they wanted to help me schedule a visit. And once the day the visit came, they even gave me a lift. Once I got there, I spoke with the doctor about my desire to transition, what my goals were, and what I wanted. Now, obviously, I don't remember what all I said because I didn't take note, but I guarantee that I mentioned being real eager to grow breasts and to feel comfortable wearing dresses and cute outfits. Because, as you can guess, I was focused on the external transformation, and that's what I was mainly focused on for myself. But what I did know was that, again, I really wanted to wear some cute outfits because even as a child, I was jealous that women got to wear all the cool and colorful outfits, while boys seemed doomed to wear t shirt and jeans or button ups and suits. I didn't want that for myself. And I'll also admit that, physically speaking, I always found feminine shapes, hourglass pears, and apple shaped women especially, to have the most beautiful bodies on earth. And I didn't know how to express it at the time, but I wanted that for myself. And so when I expressed this to the clinic, they said, okay, we just need to run some tests. And if everything checks out, then you're good to go. We'll sign you a prescription and you can just go pick them up. They told me to come back a month later for the results of the blood test, of the blood work. And that day was June 30th, 2025. Then I'd be good to go. And I can't tell you how excited I was. Now, time passed, and obviously the month that followed was a blur. And so I was basically just trying to get by and do what I need to do. And then the work year ended. And so I just had to sit and wait and wait and wait for a whole week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, all through Pride Month for this day. So the day came, and I was stressed out because, as it turns out, the ride that I had arranged flaked out at me at the last minute, and my backup ride was running late. I was panicking and crying and worried that I'd have to wait weeks to see the clinic because the clinic did have grace period hours, basically 15 minutes after your assigned start time. But if I missed that, I had no idea how soon I would be able to see them again. So I was imagining I would have to wait 3 months. I wouldn't be able to start HRT until the next work year. And that depressed me so bad because it felt like that just having people flake or having people like get caught in traffic was going to cost me my opportunity to start HRT, which isn't fair, I will admit, 100%. But again, I was crying, I was panicking, I wasn't exactly thinking very clearly. But I decided that the only chance I would have to make the meeting was to call for an Uber and ask my backup ride to pick me up at the clinic afterwards. Now, of course, the Uber got caught up in traffic, and there was road work on the way between my apartment at the time and the clinic. And so, what should have taken 5, 10 minutes took 20, then 30, then 50 minutes. And I was running out of time really fast. Now, I feel bad for the Uber driver, to be honest, because I can imagine it had to be super uncomfortable that this mess of a queer girl sniffing and snorting in their back seat. But they drove. They just pushed to get me there because they could see how upset I was. And I finally arrived. It was the 5 minute mark I remember before Doom. I ran in, buzzed the front buzzer, and told them that I needed to hurry up and check in. So I run inside after they let me in, check in, and when everything was said and done, I had about 12 seconds to spare. Now, I don't think they would have turned me away once I started check in, even if it was a little bit over, but I was frazzled at that point and it didn't feel like that. I only had about 10 minutes to calm myself down before the nurse eventually came out to call me into the back room to discuss my results. Now, I don't remember the full details. The important part was that I was cleared for takeoff. My blood work went okay. I was ready to start HRT. They understood that this was something that I really wanted for myself. So they wrote the prescription, told me where to go, and that was it. My ride gave me a lift to pick up my first patches and pills, and we had dinner at a ramen shop that night. I went home, went to the bathroom, and slapped my first estrogen patches on my arms and sucked down my first two antihistamine pills. And after that, I went to bed early because I was exhausted from all the crying and cursing that day. And the next day, I woke up and immediately ran to the bathroom and started rubbing my chest, hoping to have a hint of boobs. And obviously, a day, a week was not going to be any kind of visible results. This isn't a cartoon, but that didn't stop me from feeling myself up every morning for the rest of the summer. Now, I was told about the physical changes and I was told about the emotional changes, but I didn't actually expect to notice them. Things like sleeping better, becoming more emotional, experiencing sensations a lot more differently, and slight changes in libido, how I smelled. But I didn't notice any of those changes until the third or fourth month. I remember that it started one day when I realized how easily I cried to the media I was watching. Sad scenes that made me sniffle when I was a boy were now putting me into wheezy, sobbing fits. I also noticed that my skin was softer. I didn't sweat as much, and I smelled a lot better. Now, there was a debuff. I was also keenly aware of colder temperatures. Temperatures that I could shrug off the year before was suddenly making me shiver. I remember thinking, so this is how my mom felt. Because growing up, I never quite understood how she was always so cold compared to my brother, my dad, and I. So, obviously, the big change was how emotional I was. Being able to live as myself made me more open to expressing and feeling my emotions. And that was the most positive change for me because I no longer felt afraid of expressing myself because I was expressing myself as me rather than what somebody else wanted me to be. Anywho, other changes that I noticed was having a bigger craving for salty food like pickles and salty chicken McNuggets. I'm going to be real. I also had a much more pronounced sweet tooth, and eventually I started smiling a lot more. It was the best way to describe it is that I was shifting and I was slowly having a much larger appreciation for life. I could enjoy things more openly. I wasn't as ashamed to smile, and it made me a lot friendlier also. I was more open to striking up conversations, even with total strangers on a bus. I was just happier. It helped that I had a therapist at the time who helped me process my feelings about my changes, as well as my hurts about friendships and family that I lost in order to be who I was. Like, at that point, I had been away from my family for nearly 2 years. And even though my father was directly responsible for me wanting to be a writer growing up, we just went further and set further apart. And it was mostly due to politics because he was very much a right wing kind of guy. And I'm very, very progressive. So we would never see eye to eye. And he was very shitty about that. I remember that at the time, I had spoken with my dad a grand total of two, maybe three times. And each time we spoke, he started the conversation with some shit that he heard from Fox News mostly. And in fact, some parts of my family never even bothered to reach out. I was literally on my own in my new home, in my new body. But eventually, I found in my heart to confess who I was to my mom because I really wanted to have some connection that believed in me and knew who I was. Now, of course, she had questions and concerns because she was a little ill informed about transness, um, about as ill informed as I was years prior. But she was open to talking and learning. She spoke with her therapist about me, with my permission, of course, and we became far closer. In short, along with the hidden changes, I learned who my true friends, allies, and family were, and it wasn't always those tied to me by blood. Now, next up, let's talk about what we all know that I was looking forward to, the wibble wobble jiggle physics. I think it was either late autumn or early winter when I felt and notice the physical changes. I remember the day too, just not the date. But I was on my way to work, and there's a hill near my job that I would walk down if I didn't feel like walking all the way around the sidewalk to get to the front door. And it was a dry day, so I figured the hill was safe. So I start running down the hill, and I noticed a wobble in my chest that I had never noticed before. Realizing what was going on, I immediately run inside to the bathroom and threw off my shirt and just looked at myself. And there they were. I had boobs. They were small at the time, but I had them. And I just started crying. I started playing with them, just staring at them. And I realized that I was physically becoming my true self. Soon after that, I noticed that my bottom was filling out as well. And that had a little jiggle as well. My hips grew out, my waist was snatched, and I was beginning to look a lot more like my mom. I also noticed that my facial hair, which was a huge sign and source of dysphoria for me, was growing a lot thinner over time. Before HRT, I hate to admit, but my facial hair grew like I was a cartoon mountaineer, all bushy scruff from cheek to chin. And I was happy to say that it went from being that to proverbially a bunch of patches of grass whenever it grew. I no longer had to shave myself every day to avoid feeling horrible. I just had to shave maybe every other day, eventually every 2 or 3 days, eventually once a week. Now, I still plan on getting LASIK, but we'll talk about that later. A month later, though, deep into winter, one of my best friends and coworkers surprised me with a gift. They had noticed my changes and wanted to get me clothes that would match my ideal for myself. So they paid for a fashion consultation at a women's consignment store, and it came with a $100 gift card to buy whatever I wanted. And I remember that on the day of the consultation, I went and I had the whole store to myself. The worker that was there had selected a bunch of clothes based on some fashion ideals that I had and some inspos that I gave. And I got to play dress up with myself, just look myself in the mirror, have the woman talk about it. It was really fun conversation. And I felt absolutely just gorgeous getting to wear my first skirts, my first dresses, my first bralette, and cute shirts and pants, including a black pair of sparkle jeans that I fucking adore to this day. I ended up spending the entire gift card and then $200 on top of that because there was just so much stuff that I wanted to buy that made me feel good about myself. And a couple months back, from today, not from then, but a couple months back from today, I even had reconnected with my cousin. And my cousin, this specific cousin, is lesbian and has always been very supportive of me and continue to be so. I confessed to her about my true identity and showed some pictures of that consultation day, and she was enthusiastic. She shouted about how my mom's jeans were strong and how much happier I looked. And you know what? I was. So, since then, what now? Now, a lot happened over the year that followed, June 30th, 2025. My breasts have grown to a noticeable size where they have some heft. My feet have shrunk enough that I can actually wear some platform heels that I bought 2 years prior. I wore a dress at a public event, actually two public events now, and even went to the women's restroom at a major function. And I was accepted. People just didn't care. They just let me go. They just, I was just another one of the girls. I've come out of my job and only go by my true name, my chosen name, rather than the dead name. And I've even started toying with makeup. Although, to be honest, I'm very much a beginner, so I'm not very good at it. But getting to play with the makeup kit was just wonderful. There are things that I still want to do, like voice training, LASIK hair removal, a formal legal name change, to name a few. But my relationship with my actual friends has gotten stronger to the point that I am just one of the girls with them, just like I was at work, just like with some of my close friends, my cousin, for instance. I'm being invited to girls only events that I never thought I'd be welcome to. And I've also reached out and made friends with trans and queer content creators, video game devs, and communities online. I feel like I'm part of a world that was designed for queer folk like me. And it's all because I took that first step. Now, obviously, it's not all roses. Besides the fact that my chest has gotten a lot more sensitive, which means that if I like turn too hard when I'm next to a door, I can hit my breast on something and hurt myself. But I have experienced days of moodiness. I do struggle with confidence every once in a while, because I don't feel like I'm reaching the voice or the presentation that I want. Like, I'm still in the process of getting rid of my old boy clothing so that I can have my clothing. Not to mention what's happening to women like me in the US. It's not kind out there for us. But despite that, despite all these challenges I faced and faced, all because I want to be my true self, I still keep going because I've always been a mouthy kid who dared to question why things had to be the way they were, and often instead said, I'm going to do my own thing because nobody tells me that I should settle. A better world is possible. It might take work, it might take a lot of struggle, it might be scary, but a better world is possible. Now, I don't know where I'll be a year from now, but life's gotten so much better since I started HRT. If you're trans, questioning your gender, or an ally, or wondering if HRT is right for you, unfortunately, I don't have the exact answers because everyone's story is different. Every journey is different. What I can say is that when you do what you want and feel is right for you, life makes a lot more sense and is so much better. So that's my story. Today marks year 2 on HRT. We'll see where I am next year. But as always, this is FifiSqueaks, the mouse girl and the house girl. And we had a chat, and I hope you have a lovely time. Goodbye and love you. Mwah.